made, but we did make a lot of mistakes in this game. And actually the mistakes we made apply just as much to paid games in many ways as free-to-play. Free-to-play games are tough to make for lots and lots of reasons, because we don't just get to make a great game, which is the panacea for everything. We have to do all of the stuff aside from that. And it makes it particularly tough when there's only technically 4 of you. Spiritually, with 5 people in the team, technically there's 4 of us. There's our programmer Chris, who's kind of like the rock of our team, who actually makes all this stuff happen. Without him, we wouldn't have a game at all. Nick, our artist, who makes it beautiful. Jogo makes it fun. Chris is not really part of our team. Chris Randall's an audio contractor, but he does such an amazing job with the audio design for our games. Spiritually, he feels like he's part of our team, so we always include him. And then there's me, who I kind of do everything else that isn't the fun stuff. I do all the kind of business stuff, speak to Apple, help us get all the features on the store. But oddly, 8 years ago, I wasn't in the games industry. I used to work in a marketing and analytics company. And 8 years ago, I left that to join the games industry, thinking I'll leave all this horrible analytics stuff behind me and I'll go into games. And then, just as that happened, analytics started to become a big, important thing. So part of what I want to talk about is how everyone can be using analytics to make the game better. Give you some numbers first of all. I promised Byron I'd be kind of completely expose all the numbers. If you want to ask me any other questions or anything I don't include in the slide, ask me at the end. We want to be completely transparent and open. The successes we do have in our game purely come from the other indie developers who have been generous enough to share their numbers and their data with us, so we can learn from them. We want to pass that on and keep sharing the knowledge of stuff we're learning, because I think together it will make us all better game developers, and then we can start competing even better. So Lumo Deliveries did 1 million downloads in its first week. I think it's pretty good. We were pleased with that. If you want to know one reason why we do free-to-play games, that's it. We all make games because we want as many people in the world as possible to play our games. I don't want to make a game to play by 6 people who love it. I want it to be played by everyone to love it. Giving your game away for free means that you get to get millions of people to play your game. Unfortunately, it doesn't pay the bills very well, which is where we start thinking about how we can actually make money. So in the first week, we generated $40,000 in revenue. I don't think it set the world alight in terms of revenue, but it did do $40,000. Which is great. We're a small team, there's 4 of us. We don't need to be rolling around with money, but we do need to make enough to pay our bills, and the game's doing that. Here's the interesting thing though, and you may not be able to read this if you were back, judging by where I was earlier, but when we soft launched the game 8 weeks before, the performance financially was so dreadful that by making a few changes between soft launch and launch, we increased the amount of revenue we generated in the game by 250%. Just by changing a few very small things in the game. We made a massive difference. We really balled stuff up for soft launch. So we made sure we fixed it for launch. And the stuff I'm going to go through in the next 20 minutes or so is really showing you those things we changed that gave us the biggest uplift in that revenue. So if you're not thinking about doing free-to-play, this will be relevant because some of it relates to how you treat your players. If you're ever thinking about free-to-play, these will definitely be useful. They're not just things that are specific to our game. So, yeah, it is tough because yes, you have to make a great game, and what defines a great game can be over-interpretation. We also have to do the monetization, the analytics, the onboarding, the retention, the conversion, and everything else that goes with it. And there are lots of different reasons to make that difficult. But the process we use is really simple. Really simple. So, with any game, you pour people in the front of your machine, and out comes money. In a paid game, those people are paying to be poured into your machine, so you definitely guarantee you have money coming out the back end. Yeah, it's a simple pipeline. However, every time you make a mistake in a free-to-play game, you hemorrhage some of these people. They start pouring out of your little pipeline, which means you get less money. And so for us, our job, simply as game developers, is to stop that happening as much as we possibly can. Yeah, stop these little friction points. And normally these points happen at similar points. So we will lose people the minute they start downloading our game. So there's a psychological principle called social consistency. Social consistency in games kind of works something like this if it's a paid game. I've paid £10 for this game. People who pay to play a rubbish game must be idiots. I've paid £10, so I'm not an idiot, this game has to be good. Yet people don't want to admit a game's rubbish if they've paid money for it, they'll give it more of a chance. You'll see this psychologically. If you go to speak to someone who's just bet on a horse at horse racing, if you speak to them before and you speak to them after, they believe the chances they believe their horse has of winning goes up after they've placed the bet. Nothing changes, they don't get any more information, but they believe that they've placed this bet on because the horse is going to win, so they believe the chances are going to go up. Similar with game development. If someone pays £10 for your game, they believe your game is going to be good, so they're going to give your game 2 or 3 or 4 hours before they'll go, actually it's not very good at stop, or love it and tell all their friends about it, it'd be amazing. With a free game, their commitment to your game is 0. Yep, they've probably downloaded 5 free games all at the same time. They'll open it, they'll play it for about 2 seconds. If they hate it, they'll close it, delete it, and move on to the next one. It's so transient. So, if we make mistakes in tutorial, and I'll show you how bad some of this can be, because we did it badly on some key points earlier, you start hemorrhaging players. If you make a rubbish game, you will lose players. If you don't convert these players into spending money, you won't make any money, and once they've decided they're going to spend, unless they actually go through and complete the sale, so go through from the I want to spend money and go through whatever your process is till they've actually parted with cash on, in our case on the App Store through iTunes, then we don't make any money. And every time we lose players at one of these points, that affects our ability to keep making games. Make sense? Yep. Simple as that. The order we approach this in is quite interesting. So number 1, most important thing, we make sure the tutorial is amazing. Because that's the first place we're going to start losing players. That's their first experience. There were some great talks yesterday on how to do good tutorials. Listen to those, it will save you lots of money because you do not want to hemorrhage players here. The second thing, you need to make a great game. If your game is rubbish and all of those 3 elements, all from the second game right the way through to the strategic part of the game, if anything of those wrong, you'll lose players. Your game has to be great. Here's the bit that people do in the wrong order though. The next thing we do is we fix the back end part of our sales pipeline. So for us, the second when someone says, I want to spend some money in your game, I want to buy something, we look at how many of those people are going through and completing and how we can get that better. There'll be lots of things that stop them. For example, you've got too many screens from the second where they say, I want to spend money in your game. If you've got 8 screens until they get to the bit where they've actually parted with the cash, you'll lose people on every one of those steps. So how do you make that as slick as possible? Only after we've fixed that, we then worry about how we're going to convert players into actually spending money. Only after we know we've got great tutorial, great game, and once they choose to spend money they'll get through, only then we work about converting them. And the reason for that is really simple. If I'm talking about converting people to sales, and my sales process is broken, everyone I convert, they've got less chance of actually spending money. So I'm pouring people into a bit of my machine that I know is broken that's actually going to convert them to money. Make sense? And I know it's horrible talking about money, and I know we're big boos when people talk about money, but I have a simple belief. My simple belief is this, as creative people, we deserve to earn the same kind of living and earn the same wages as people who work in non-creative industries. Just because we choose to do a creative thing doesn't mean that we're less valuable than someone who works in a bank adding up checks, as I used to do when I first left school. Yeah? It doesn't mean we're less valuable. We deserve to earn a living. So it's important for us to focus on how we're going to make money from our creative endeavours so we can carry on doing it in a sustainable way. Make sense? Yeah. Not trying to become rich, just trying to make nice living. Rich if you're good, just not out. Okay, so that's our pipeline, that's what we're doing. The way we do this is really simple. We show the game to people as frequently as we possibly can. We watch how those people are playing our game and we fix the problems we see they encounter. It is as simple as that. What I see a lot is people doing it about here, when they're at beta. They go, yeah, your game's finished, let's start showing it to people. And at that point, what you're hoping for is a massive pat on the back. You're hoping these people are going to pat you on the back and go, your game is amazing. Every time you then hear anything that's not that, I don't know this, I don't like that, you ignore it because you haven't got time to fix it. The earlier you're getting that feedback, the easier it is to act on, the easier it is to do this. So, about 6 weeks into development, we had a really ropey first playable prototype. It had no tutorial, it barely had 2 screens that showed the gameplay. We did a usability test with 10 people who went through and played our game. About 4 or 5 weeks after that, we were lucky enough to be exhibiting at MCM Comic Con in London. They had over 100,000 people through the door in 2.5 days. We probably had over 100 people play our game in the course of that. Between myself and Jonathan and some of the other members of the team, we stood behind people and we watched them have a horrible time with our game. And we went away with a massive list of things we needed to go and fix. We then started, between here and here, we did other stuff. So we had player research, the UI UX usability people. They did an expert review of our game. It wasn't cheap, I think it cost about £1,500, but it was worth every penny. We don't have loads of money, so we're really careful about where we spend it and make sure we get value from it. That was good money, well spent. We were super lucky. We had a one-on-one session with a lady called Rachel Roth, who's Apple's UI UX evangelist. She played our game. We sat down with her for an hour. She spoke at us for 53 minutes and gave us a list of 75 things that were wrong with our game that we had to fix. We then started doing closed beta, where we started sending the build out to human beings, originally friends and family. Then we started getting more and more people on board. We did 2 rounds of closed beta before we went into soft launch. So we had loads and loads and loads and loads of context of people playing our game. One thing that I will tell you is your players are never ever wrong. Yeah? What I hear a lot of time when I see this is people saying, oh, they're not playing the game right. They're playing it how the real players are going to play when they get in the real world. It's you who've not communicated your game correctly. The people aren't playing it correctly. It's your responsibility to ensure your players have a good time. Every time they come back to you and tell you that, that's where Jogo goes, I've just got another player who's just said this. It's why, for me, Jogo's, you put your fingers in here a second, Jogo? It's why he's one of the best designers in the industry, because he doesn't focus on his own ego and what he wants. He's always saying to us, yeah, but the player wants this. This is important to the player, and it's all about the players. That's our process. So the game, I hopefully can skip through this quite quickly, because Jogo went through this a bit earlier. Game's super simple. The core game consists of 3 screens. You have drivers, vehicles, and jobs. Jobs take real-world time to do. It's a timer-based game, and we had some fun with this when we started speaking to publishers. Because, so you say, I'm going to send Percy in a Schonk sedan to Eau Claire, and it's going to take 6 minutes and 58 seconds, and I'm going to earn 540 Lumo bucks. I press start on that, it becomes one of these jobs that ticks along. This is one screen we had problems with publishers. They went, but it makes it really clear that your game's a timer-based game, right? Yes, it's a timer-based game. People who hate timer-based games are going to hate our game. It's important we tell them this is the game. People who love our game love it. People who hate it are going to hate it. Good, let's tell them. Let's tell them what the game is. I think a lot of people hate timer-based games when they go, oh, I'm an action-adventure game. Oh, here's some timers. Yeah, that's what people hate, because you're being dishonest. If it's a timer-based game, and it's all about setting up these timers and waiting, and then doing your delivery and collecting your reward and making your decisions about what you're going to do with your business, people like that. This was a game that Jogo created specifically. So we sat in the meeting and he said, I want a game that's about the decisions and tactics, not about the skill gameplay. And that's what we created. It's about the decisions and tactics of running a business. So that's our game. I needed to give you some context, because we're going to go through some specific things that we found as we're going through. So onboarding, or tutorials, or whatever you want to call it. It's one of the things I love about free-to-play. You get to learn loads of new jargon you get to use. So, onboarding. We've got some others coming up as well. So, usability fixes. First usability fix. This was from our very, very first play session. To select drivers, or vehicles, or jobs, you just swipe through a carousel. Swipe, swipe, swipe. Super easy. We all got it. It was really nice. We wanted it to be like that so you could play it with one hand while you sat in the toilet. It's all fine. When we did the first usability test, no one knew. We watched one player struggle for 25 minutes and still not be able to work out how they could change drivers, vehicles and jobs. 25 minutes. So we didn't change it because we knew the mechanic was good, but we knew we had to put something about this in the tutorial and make it explicit. Had we not done that usability test, we wouldn't have done that, because we would have assumed everyone would have got it. Our game would have failed on day one. We would have got every single person who played that game would have bailed out and given us 1 star. Yeah, 1 star, can't play it, doesn't work, done, delete it, gone. That was just from the first test. That was why we, and actually we could have given this was in probably 2 weeks before that, as a working mechanic. We could have done our first test 2 weeks before and saved us 2 weeks of iteration on something that we needed to fix. Make sense? Over the next few weeks, we did lots of this. So between our 2 rounds of usability test and the MCM Comic Con event, we changed lots. This is kind of, these 2 screens look broadly similar, don't they? They're not massive differences. I can tell you there are loads of differences between these 2 screens that made a significant difference to the player experience. And this is one of the things we've done well as a team over the years, is we don't focus on necessarily the big thing. We know that if we change 100 small things, it makes the experience slicker and better. As a team, we know that our players don't care that we're 4 people in a railway arch in Leamington Spa. They just want a good game. They don't care whether it's made by one person in a bedroom, 4 people in a railway arch, or 100 people in California. They just want to play the game and make it good. So for us, we need to make games that are as polished as any other developer in the world, so when our players play the game, they don't care. They don't even think about it. So that tends to come from small details. So let's show you some of the small things that we changed. I'll talk about one of these a bit later on. But here's an interesting thing. So one of the things we found from a lot of the play tests at Comic-Con and stuff is this carousel loops. So when you get to the end of all the jobs, you get your first job back round again and round and round it loops. People didn't get it. They felt it was endless and they got confused and there was too much information. We just put this little bar with a heart that just dangles in between them, just to tell players when they've looped. It doesn't have a big sign on it that says you've come around to the beginning. Players just know that, but it was enough information to give them a break. This start job button, this is a button, believe it or not, that you're supposed to press to start your job. No one realised. No one would ever press it. People would press everything else on the screen other than that. We made it a big button like this. People still didn't press it. So we then wobbled the button about. Then people started pressing it. And we called it out explicitly in the tutorial. There are 4 buttons on the bottom here that took you to 4 different parts of our game. When we were at Comic-Con, we watched these people time and time again pressing these buttons, getting into different screens, getting completely lost. Apparently 4 buttons was too many. We have 2 now. We'll talk about this one in a bit because it's an important one. There are loads and loads of other tiny little fixes on the screen, but it's all about the small details. It's all about communicating stuff. Even the small things like, this job's going to take 1 minute, 6.66 seconds. You won't believe that the programmer put that one in. The player doesn't need to know that. 1 minute, 7 seconds is enough information. People aren't going to be measuring their lives down to tenths of a second. So after all of these changes, after everything that happened, we were ready for soft launch. We'd gone through all of our usability testing, we were ready, we knew the game was in a good place, and then I sat and had coffee with bloody Graham McAllister. I don't know if you know bloody Graham McAllister. The question that Jogo was talking about earlier, where this question of, but why? That was Graham. It was me having coffee with Graham, and he said, oh, can I see your game? So Graham McAllister runs player research. Graham is probably, I believe, one of the world's greatest experts in human interaction with video games. He's amazing. Let me let you into a secret. Graham can't help himself but give you feedback on your game. He will do this. So if you see him at a trade show, if you see him at an event, just say, oh, hi Graham, really like what your company does, you're brilliant. Can I show you my game? And you will get probably £3,000 worth of consultancy for free when he tells you everything that's wrong with your game. So if you see him, do it. Don't tell me that I said it, but he's lovely as well, and he really, really knows his stuff. He was the one who went through the game and goes, yeah, but so what's the game about? I said, well, you do these jobs. And he's like, okay, great, so what do I do the jobs for? I said, well, so you can earn more money. He's like, yeah, but why? I said, well, you earn more money, you can buy better vehicles. He's like, yeah, okay, but why? I said, well, you get better vehicles, you can earn more money. And there was no metagame, there was no big point. We thought all the stuff we had was enough, it wasn't. And as it turned out, so we were about 2 weeks from soft launch when I had this coffee with Graham. I came into the office, sat down with Jogo, we both went through the game, and we went, shit, yeah, right. This feature's going to take us about a month to put in. So we came up with a design for it, and we had to push the soft launch date by three weeks in the end. That was out of our schedule. That was going to cost us more money. We all got bills and everything we need to pay. It extended the time before the game was released, before we start generating any revenue. But we needed to do it, and we know it was the right decision because of all of the angry feedback we get from players who can't dominate Mongolia. My girlfriend Jill still play in this, and she still says to me every day, I still haven't got bloody Mongolia to come up. So, here we go. Bloody Graham McAllister. Then we really were ready for soft launch. We had everything fixed. We knew the game was in a great shape. Out it went for soft launch. Here's the thing, we've only ever spent £1,800 on user acquisition in the whole time we've been doing the game. We don't have, I was at Pocket Gamer when they said, unless you've got £250,000 to spend on user acquisition, don't do a free-to-play game. I didn't have £250,000. I've got no idea where I was going to get £250,000 from. We spent £1,800 on user acquisition. We did it once, one time only, and that was at soft launch. And we did it at soft launch not because we wanted to make lots of money, not because we wanted to cover our costs, but if we knew that if we didn't get a decent amount of data in the beginning of the game, we can't change anything. How do I know if our game's performing well? How do I know if it's going to do well globally if I've only got 6 people in Lithuania playing it? Yeah. So we picked one territory as our soft launch territory. We actually soft launched in two because I managed to negotiate with the people doing our user acquisition that they'd give me New Zealand for free. But we picked one territory, and that one territory was Denmark. It's an odd one. Lots of people always seem to be going New Zealand, then we go to Canada, and we picked it for two reasons. One, because a very clever friend of mine who works at a much larger studio, and Steve, these kind of Nordic countries are amazing for doing your soft launching. I was like, okay, I'll listen to him, he's really clever. And the second thing is the company I was speaking to said, we've got really great representation in Denmark. We can get you good coverage. And they did, they were true to their word. We were the #1 free app in Denmark. Not free game, free app for a day. We were the #1 free app. That meant we got something like 20,000 real users over and above the stuff that we actually paid to acquire to use. So we've got statistically significant data that we could look at. That's great, but looking at data isn't just the key thing. There are 4 of us. I don't have a team of data analysts. I'm not like Natural Motion, that every team has like 2 data analysts who sat in each team giving them stuff. There's just 4 of us. Chris is busy programming the game, Jogo's busy patching up the design of the game, Nick's creating all the artwork, so it's just effectively me to look at the data analysts. So we sat down at the beginning, Jogo and I sat down and said, we won't have time to look at analysing every button click of every territory of this and that and how we're going to cut and slice it. And this is the thing that people find most daunting is it's easy to put in all the hooks and triggers for analytics. Yeah? Companies like Flurry and Delta DNA make it really easy to implement it, but that's not the hard part. The hard part is turning it into stuff you can actually look at and you can act on. So at the very beginning, we decided it's all about the questions. Let's not look at everything that's happening in the game. Let's look at things that we can actually act on. Let's look at some data that we can look at, draw some meaningful conclusions, and make some changes about and change the player behaviours. So, for example, 2 questions. Why are people leaving and how can we fix it? Yeah, that's a pretty good thing. If we go back to the little pipeline we had earlier, if all you're saying is, why am I losing players in our game and how can we stop this happening? And for us, with the kind of game we were making, we could glean the why by looking at when players were leaving. So just by understanding at what point in someone's play cycle they're leaving our game, we can then start to try and understand why they're leaving, and if we understand why they're leaving, then we can hopefully fix it and stop. Simple as that. See, this is the key thing. If you're focusing on the questions, we're not going to get bogged down with the details of the data. So for us, that meant looking at the range classes reached. So each vehicle that you buy unlocks a new range class, and a range class is effectively a territory, a kind of circular territory around the world. So if you start in the UK, you start delivering locally in the UK, you buy your next vehicle up and you start delivering halfway across the UK, 3rd vehicle nationally across the UK, 4th vehicle you start getting into Europe, 5th vehicle you start getting into Eastern Europe, so you're unlocking these territories as you go. So by looking at the range class that people are reaching, we can see how many vehicles they're buying and how far they're progressing across the game. Number of jobs completed, so how many jobs are people doing? And we can then see how many jobs it takes them to get between each range class, and also how many jobs are they playing in the game before they're getting bored and leaving this. So is it the number of jobs, are they earning good money? And that takes me to the last one, which is what we call Lumo bucks per minute. We work out how much a player earns for every minute of their life they invest in our game, how much in-game currency they're earning. And by looking at that, we can see how that then affects the value across the game. So how many minutes does someone have to play for before they can earn this vehicle? Is that fair? Is it not fair? Those kind of questions we can ask. Yeah, but just really simple things. Just looking at those 3 areas of the game, we can start to glean stuff. The other thing we look at is things like the tutorial. So here's the real data from our soft launch. This is after the first week of soft launch. So each one of those pink circles represents a screen in our tutorial. And so this graph is showing how many people we're losing screen by screen of tutorial until they complete the tutorial. It might terrify you to know that to complete our tutorial our game takes probably 2 minutes. So in 2 minutes of someone downloading our game, we were losing about 55% of our players. Oh, we were losing 45, we were keeping about 55% of our players. Yeah, remember what I was saying earlier, this is social consistency in action. These players have invested no money in our game. They're probably playing it because they've seen it on the front page of the App Store. That's what was happening in launch. So they know nothing about it, they don't know if it's going for them. If you've seen it on the front page, clicked install, downloaded it, start playing it. We're always going to lose loads and loads of players. Because people are playing, go, well, I don't like timer-based games, gone, done, delete. I don't like this, I don't like that, oh, it's boring, don't like it. That's kind of fine, it goes with the part, it's par for the territory. But what the astute of you can see is that there are 2 points in our tutorial where we're absolutely hemorrhaging players. This is where a player learns how to hire a driver and expand their fleet, and where they learn how to buy a vehicle. The problem we had is this. These are our beautiful posters that each vehicle, so when you're going to buy a vehicle, we have a whole range of these, one for each vehicle, that shows the vehicle, its options, what it's got, and how much it costs. And in the tutorial, we take people to this page and say, buy your first shonk sedan, and we ensure in the tutorial they've got enough money to buy it. Yeah, we give them the money in the game, we're really generous with in-game currency. One of our mantras in the team is, if you make a free-to-play game, our game should be free-to-play. So people can complete our game without spending a single penny in our game. We've almost designed it, in fact we have designed it, so that's the best way of playing our game. It's a grind-based game. We've balanced and weighted the game, so you have the most fun going through our game just playing it without spending any money. But if you get excited about getting a UFO, spend the money on the UFO, that's fine. We're not going to beat you up for it, but you don't have to. Yeah? But when you went into this screen, we don't give you any coffee, which is our premium currency. We only give you in-game currency, the Lumo bucks. And when you went in, both of these items are clearly visible on screen and both wobbling about with a nice kind of spend me animation. A percentage of our players, as it turned out a large percentage, were clicking on the coffee. Particularly on the second time, because the first time they come to buy something, they'd use Lumo bucks. They go, oh, I know all about Lumo bucks. Second time, they go, oh, I've not spent coffee, I'll spend coffee. Immediately say, oh, you don't have any coffee, would you like to buy some coffee? So they're immediately going into a loop, they're saying, spend some money in our game. We didn't want them spending real money in our game at that point. That's the exact opposite of what we were trying to do, is what our players were doing. So we fixed it. We just stopped wobbling that. That's all we did. We just stopped animating the coffee cup. And by stopping animating that, we saved 10% of the loss from our tutorial. That is, as it turned out, in actual launch data, meant that we got 100,000 more players for our tutorial just by stopping 2 buttons wobbling in the game. But we wouldn't have known that had we not been looking at the tutorial data. And I don't care whether you make a free-to-play game or a paid game. If you're doing a tutorial, you could do that. It's really easy. Just look, set off a trigger every time someone gets through a new tutorial part of your screen and see how many players you're losing on each step of that and see where your problems are. That easy. Everyone can do that. Next step then. So we've got the tutorial working better. We're still working on it. It's like onion skinning. You fix a problem, peel off the onion skin, you can then see little smaller problems. You fix those, you then see smaller problems. You fix those, you keep going and keep going. Next problem, retention. So here's what we saw in our retention curve. This is kind of showing what range class our players were getting to. So the majority of our players were getting to range class 4. Great, this is going really well, but not many players were getting to range class 5. This was a big problem. So it's like less than a third of players who were getting to range class 4 were getting to range class 5. So because we were measuring this, we could look at it and see what the problems were. So we then, Jonathan and I, this is where it's really nice. I'm not a game designer, I can just punch numbers and crunch numbers out of things. So I'd sit down with Jonathan and say, oh, this is happening, why do you think this is happening? And we'd look at the game, we're looking at what people are doing, we're chatting about what we've seen in previous usability tests. And then Jonathan said to me, how many drivers are people getting? And we discovered this, that 73% of the players at that stage all had Sylvia. Sylvia was something like the 5th driver you could hire in a game. So they had loads of drivers, but not many vehicles. And that causes a problem for us, because what that means is, loads of our players have got range class 1, 2 and 3 vehicles. These are doing really short jobs, between 30 seconds to a minute. Our game gets really, really boring and repetitive if you're doing loads of 1-minute jobs. Our game is all about sending your vehicles on long-range jobs, so you set a job off, you put your phone in your pocket, you don't worry about it for an hour, the phone buzzes, jobs arrive, you go in and you set up your next job. That's what we designed the game to be about. We didn't design it about someone sat there going, 30-second job, another 30-second job, another 30-second job, going through our really simple game loop 100 times and going on board now. But it turns out they really, really loved the drivers. Because they really loved the drivers, they were hiring loads of drivers, and they weren't buying loads of vehicles, so they weren't going through different range classes. So it's really simple. We just made Sylvia much more expensive. Like a lot more expensive, like 5 times the price she was to hire originally. Because what that did was it pushed people into the game that we knew, the game flow that we knew would create a better experience for the player. Yep. A lot of people see these decisions, they go, oh, it's all about the money, they make it for monetization purposes. No, it wasn't about that. We knew that if we did that, more players would go, oh, I can't afford her until I've done some more jobs. Oh, I can afford a new vehicle, I'll get a new vehicle. So it's moving people into our game flow, it's nudging them into the game flow that we want them to experience. And that's what we saw. We saw a massive jump, pretty much immediately, from players who were getting to range class 5. Next problem, no one's getting to range class 6. And the reason they're not getting to range class 6 is because we realised we had a second problem. The Lumo bucks per minute. So to get to range class 6, you needed to buy a Lufo. Now, this is the actual jump in game. So between 3,500 for a Spingo to 42,000 for a Lufo. Now again, that's not for cynical monetization purposes, it's because we actually wanted you to expand and end up with like a nice little fleet of different vehicles with some different drivers, with about 4 or 5 vehicles doing different jobs all at the same time. So we needed this to be slightly heavier, and this is as you upgrade through the vehicles, the amount of money you're earning for each job increases in quite big steps, so you can get to this bridge quite quickly. So by the time you've got 3 Spingos going, you're probably talking about half a day before you can save up to get a Lufo. But here's the problem, you'd save up, people were super excited about getting to their Lufo. We were getting tweets from people going, oh, I can't wait, I've nearly got enough of my flying saucer. When you get it, the amount of money that we were giving you in Lumo bucks per minute wasn't a significant step up. It wasn't a big jump up in value. So players were saving to get this amazing Lufo, and when they saw the jobs they could do with it and how much they were going to earn, it was disappointing. So they weren't going to spend money on it. So that was our next problem to fix. And we fixed it simply. We gave people more money for doing those jobs. It suddenly felt like it was more valuable to them, and people seemed happier, and we progressed through. But you can see the kind of process. All we're looking at is measuring a few simple statistics, combining that with our experience of having watched players play our game through our play tests, and then coming up with suppositions. Analytics don't give you the answers, they give you the questions. But what you can do in this beautiful digital world is you can make a supposition, you can test it against the data, and then you can roll out an update and see if it fixes the problem. If it fixes the problem, you go, great. If it doesn't, you go, right, we need to look back at it again. This hasn't fixed it, or it hasn't changed enough. Yeah, makes sense. It's simple stuff, something we can all do in every game. We genuinely believe that the time and effort and work that we put into learning to make free-to-play games better, if we ever go back to making paid games, and we're not against doing paid games, it depends on our game and our audience, it will make us better game developers. Okay. A couple more slides and we can answer some questions. So, next thing that we did horrendously wrong. To buy in-game currency, our premium currency in-game, what you did is you clicked on this coffee cup and it would take you to the buy in-game currency screen. You could buy as much as you want. Simple as that. Big problem is, it doesn't look very buttony. We didn't find anyone was pressing it. We just put a big red plus on it. It increased the amount of people that were pressing it. Sounds stupid and obvious, everyone goes, yeah, of course it is, you bunch of idiots. Why didn't you put a plus on it to start with? I'll tell you why we didn't, because we didn't think about it, and the amount of my friends who are making free-to-play games, they show me their game, and they haven't got plus buttons or anything like it on theirs either. It was subtle, it wobbled. Yeah, isn't that lovely? Players aren't subtle, tell them, if you want to press something, make it appear like a button, use some visual consistency. The single biggest thing we made for our money is a conversation that Jonathan and I had early on, but we didn't have an answer to, which is, what's the first purchase? What's the first thing a player of our game should want to buy? Well, I don't know. Could be a vehicle, could be a driver, there's like choices, I don't know. We had this conversation, we couldn't think of anything clear. Until we put the price of Sylvia up really high, because we knew people wanted Sylvia. And then Jonathan said, well, now Sylvia's more expensive, why don't we do an offer on Sylvia and offer that? And we said, well, yeah, but that's not really great value, because we just put the price of Sylvia up. It's a bit mean, isn't it? And then we said, well, why don't we make something a bit better? Why don't we give you Sylvia, a cool vehicle she can drive, and a bunch of free coffee so you can actually go in and start doing some different things in the game. We'll offer that about, I can't remember what number is it about 10 jobs in, Jonathan? 10, 15 jobs, something like that?
Roughly, when you've been playing for like more than a day or two.
Yeah, so it's a point when you know what the game's about, you've hired some drivers, you're probably saving for your next vehicle, we'll go, we can carry on playing that, or what you can do is you can get this great pack that will give you Sylvia, give you a vehicle, and give you some coffee. So it gives players a clear thing to buy in the game and spend money on, which will help us then pay for our bills and food, And secondly, and most importantly, we offer great value to the player. We don't just give them something that seems unduly expensive. It's something that actually would take them to get everything we're giving them in the game. Probably take them 4 or 5 hours in gameplay to actually save up enough money. So they can make that simple decision. We only offer it to them twice. We offer it to them once quite early on in the game after they've done about 15 jobs, and about 10 jobs after that we say, sure you don't want this, and if not, then it goes away. Yeah? We're not in their face, but it is there. That has become our single biggest purchase by a country mile. Surfacing, here's my other nice jargon term. This was a friend of mine who works for another big company was talking about surfacing again one lunchtime over coffee. It's a good principle. If you've got a great game and you want to get some feedback on it, find people who make friends who are better at doing this stuff than you are, and then go out to lunch with them and get them to play their game, and they'll give you their feedback. Game developers can't help but give feedback on other people's games. They can't stop it. So in soft launch, our purchasing looks something like this. Our number one purchase was a bucket of coffee. Second came Dan. Third, Dr. Timothy Button. So, bucket of coffee, in-game currency. Cayman Dan is effectively a points doubler. He's our tax accountant. If you hire him, you get double the amount of money for every job you do after you've hired him. And Dr. Timothy Button will stop your vehicles breaking down on the road. There are 3 top purchases in soft launch. So, bucket is what's really interesting for me is I think these 2 purchases both about the $5.99 mark. In fact, I think it came down slightly more. I think it's about $5.99 in currency, about $7.99 pounds to hire Cayman Dan. Everyone's going to me, it's far too expensive. It's our second most popular purchase. The reason we made him so expensive is in many ways it bulks the game. You're earning double the amount of money, so you can get through everything double as quick. It's not the experience we want most of our players to play, but if people really want that, then great. You know, they're saying I'm so time strapped that I don't want to wait for this, I want more. Well, we've designed our game to play that way. But to hire Cayman Dan, you had to click on the coffee cup to bring up this screen. You then had to click on the upgrades tab that then showed you where you could then hire Cayman Dan and Dr. Timothy Button, and then you had to buy Dr. Timothy Button. Yeah, it's quite an arduous process. I was amazed anyone actually got there to buy him in here. But what we could see from that is how much people wanted to hire Cayman Dan for their fleet if they'd go through all of that and he was still a really popular purchase. Yeah, much more popular than any of the lower price points. We've got price points that go to 69p. People are much rather buying Cayman Dan. So what we did is a similar thing. We created these full-page adverts that don't come up frequently through the game. They come up at points. We've got an algorithm that works out when we think players are going to make the most use of Cayman Dan, when it feels like they're, oh, all of a sudden I'm going to earn 3,000 Lumo bucks for this job. If I hired him now, I'm going to get 6,000. That's awesome. At a point where it seems valuable, we'll put it up. Increase the amount of people hiring Cayman Dan by 200% overnight, just by putting an advert in for something. Because all we're doing is acting on our player feedback. Our players are telling us we really like this feature, we really like purchasing Cayman Dan, but what we knew is it was hidden, so we brought it to the surface and let people actually do what they want to do. Again, you see we give almost equal weighting. Again, we give a slightly bigger number, but just underneath it says no thanks. It says these offers require a real money purchase. We have that across the game. Before people purchase anything, we'll always say if you're going to buy something with in-game currency, it will say, oh, I'm sorry, you don't have enough for this now. You can either buy some in-game currency or continue playing our game and earn it in-game. We're upfront to our players, we're honest, we don't want people accidentally spending money. We want people to make a choice. We believe that free-to-play is a real model, and we believe that if it is a free model where people are only spending because they want to and they're not kind of naive children accidentally spending money, then we can make it really clear and people will still spend money in the game. And that seems to be happening. Yeah? Players are choosing to spend money in our game. Final slides. Our next target, the thing we've got horrendously wrong, lifetime value. So people are spending really well, really early on in their game life cycle, they're almost never spending anything again. Very low lifetime value of our game. And Jonathan explained quite eloquently in some ways why this is. So this is a tweet from about a week ago. So people who tell us that our game is impossible to complete, no, it's not impossible, it's just really difficult. Jonathan's right, it's not an optimal experience. The back part of our game where you're spending 3 months just trying to get a delivery to one territory is not great. But Becca managed it. But this one screenshot will show you the 2 things that are massively wrong with our game that we're looking at fixing next. First one is you can finish it. I guarantee at this point onwards, Becca's now deleted our game, or at least just not going to go into it anymore. She's finished our game. That's bad for us, because she obviously enjoyed playing it, because she wouldn't have gone through and completed it, but she's got nothing else that's worthwhile to do. And the second bigger issue that Jonathan used a great example of in in Halo earlier, look how much money Becca's got. She's got, I don't even know where, so there's something like 12 million Lumo bucks. There's nothing in the game that costs more than $1 million Lumo bucks. She could buy 12 Zeppelins, so she could have more Zeppelins than she could ever possibly use in her game with the amount of money she's got. She's got nothing useful to spend it on. When you were talking about strategy games earlier, there are no meaningful decisions from this point in the game. Once you get towards the back end of the game, we're so generous with the in-game currency you earn, you've got no reason really to play. In the early days, it's a real struggle. Oh, do I hire this driver? Oh, if I hire them, I can't afford to get this vehicle. I have to do another couple of jobs. Oh, now I haven't got a license. You've got all these meaningful decisions you're making. Back into the game, you're earning so much money, all you're doing is just going through emotions. So that's our next thing, is to make the back end of the game not as generous to player, but that should, we believe, increase the quality of their experience. They're making meaningful decisions, they're having to battle, but it should also give them things that they'll continue to want to spend money on. If they like our game, they want to spend money on the things that we're offering. And that's our number one thing, is we believe that our players who choose to spend money in that game are doing so because they feel that things that we're offering them, at the price we're offering them, offer good value. The minute we do that, we start making money. It's as simple as that. So, takeaways. Measure stuff you can act on. Don't measure everything. Do not be sunk in data. We did this when we did Kumo Lumo. We captured every button click that every player did, and we had this server full of data. And then I'd speak to the program and say, right, what I want to know is this, and they'd go, okay, that's going to take me 3 hours to get the query to get that, and I get this subset of data. It took like 4 days just to get a single answer on it. Just measure the stuff you know you can act on, because we're small teams. We don't have the time to have a team of analysts hacking through this stuff. Get lots of feedback. Real feedback from human beings playing your game. If you can't afford to get usability testing, there's no excuse not to do usability testing. Usability testing is finding people who are going to like your game, giving them a look at your game and watching them play it. We can all do that, and it's often free. Yeah, we can all find these people. Don't give your game to other game developers for nice feedback about your game. Game developers like to show how clever they are by telling you all the things that you've done wrong. You don't want that unless you know you want it. What you also need, what's more important, is the context of the players who are actually going to be your market. People who are going to pay money to play your game. Yep, get that feedback. Act on the feedback. Yeah, it sounds like an obvious thing. Well, I know loads of people who sit there and they tell me all the things that people have told them are wrong with their game. They don't do anything to fix any of the things. Yeah. Act on the feedback you're getting. Most importantly, soft launch. Really soft launch. I speak to people who are doing free-to-play games and go, oh no, we're not going to bother with the soft launch thing, we haven't got time, we're just going to put it out. We would have made, from our 1 million downloads, something like $6,000 had we not soft launched. So we moved $6,000 to $40,000 just by doing a soft launch. Yeah, that's the difference between being able to pay your month's rent and not being able to pay your month's rent as a team. It makes a big difference. So do soft launch, yeah, it's important. And if you are going to spend money on user acquisition, spend it in soft launch, get your data. Yeah, you don't have to spend lots, you don't have to spend fortunes, you just need to spend enough so you've got footfall. Or if not spending money, work out how you are going to get that footfall. How are you going to get enough people through your door to get some meaningful data you can actually act on. That's me done. I'm standing between you and lunch, so I've got 5 minutes for questions. So any questions?
How did you establish your relationship with Apple? That's it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's 2 bits to that question really. So the first one is there is a small team of dev relations people whose job it is to go and meet developers. That's what they want to do. I was lucky, I just bimbled into one of them at a conference.
In the UK?
In the UK, yeah. So there's 3 people based in the UK office. The 2 best points of contact are a guy called David Corral and a guy called Kyle Good. So Kyle Good's like their kind of technical support, David Corral's kind of like the business development, business relations support. If you're at a conference and you see that name on there, try and hunt him out, speak to him. He's lovely, David Corral, he's a really nice guy, and that's your starting point. Let them know you exist. Once they know you exist, then you need to think seriously. So we make our game for Apple. We don't make games for Android. People often say, well, when's the Android version? We'll do an Android version, but we designed our game from the ground up. So the App Store isn't there to make money for Apple, not through the App Store. Apple make their money from selling devices. The App Store makes the devices more appealing. If they've got really cool content, the people go, what's that you're doing? Oh, I'm monitoring my heartbeat by holding my thumb up to the camera. Wow, that's really cool. I wish I could do that. Can I do it on Android? No, can't. That's how Apple make their money. So we do cool stuff. Yeah, so we'll go through, well, yeah, you can, but bad example. But the key thing is to look at it and go, what's going to help Apple sell more devices? How do we make a game that shows off? So we use geolocation data. We use the gyroscope in the game. We follow a lot of their design principles in how we do the interaction. So the game looks and feels like a great Apple product. And then we give them a window of exclusivity. They've never asked us for it, we always say, oh yeah, it'll be on. We don't have time, we're an indie developer, we don't have time to do it for both platforms, so it'll definitely be on your platform for at least 2 or 3 months before anybody else. Yeah? Those kind of things. So think about it not just of, I'm going to make a game and Apple should feature it, think about why they're going to want to feature it. If there's new technology they've just announced at their developer conference, put it in your game. So like Metal, if you're doing a beautiful 3D game, use Metal, tell them you're using Metal, it will make them go, great, because they're looking for great Metal content. So we've just got this new innovation, look, we can deliver this quality of content. Ideally, say, oh well, before Metal we could only render these 5 enemies on screen, and now we can render 20 enemies and give them a case study. Think of it from their perspective, and that will help. And that's kind of how we've approached every one of our games, and we've been on the front page of the App Store with 3 of our games. We've been editor's choice twice. Lumo Deliveries was owned Best New Apps, and it was on the front page of the App Store in 122 countries, which is where the million downloads comes from. And also, don't underestimate lower features. So we also tell them about when we're doing updates. Our last update went out a couple of weeks ago. It was featured in Best New Updates, and it was on the 2nd page of Best New Updates. So to find that little thing on the front of the App Store, you need to scroll down to Best New Updates, and then scroll across the page. I think we're in position 14 to find our little icon. In that week, we got over 150,000 installs just from that. Just from that. I was amazed. I thought, we're in this really obscure place. That's not going to make a big difference. 150,000 installs just from that. Sorry, there was another question. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Is there a particular analytics backend you recommend?
So it depends on what you want and where you are in your life cycle. So for Lumo Deliveries, we used Flurry for the analytics, and then I use a tool called Tableau to then cut and shut the data so I can get something useful from it. Big problem with Flurry is it's almost impossible, if not impossible at the moment, to actually get the full dump of data from your game. So if like us, if you've got like, we had, in our launch week, we had 16 million sessions a day, some days, people playing our game. We can't get that data. And there's no way of getting all of it from Flurry. They won't just let us take a dump of it. So you're kind of restricted to their tools, or being able to dump out subsets of data, so it needs a bit more careful thinking. So for us it was great because it's free, and it was nice and easy to set up, but it came with those restrictions. So for the next game we're probably going to use Delta DNA, because that has some more sophisticated cut and shut tools actually on their web. And they will always let you get a complete dump of all of your data. You always own all of your data, which is great. Downside of that is it comes with a cost. It's something like, I can't remember now, it's something like £120 a month or something like that, which is a lot of money. We're lucky we've got some money in the bank now from that game that we can afford, what is probably like £1,200 a year for the licence, so it's worth it for us. I'll tell you if I come back next year whether it worked out a lot better for us than Flurry did. Flurry's been fine.